Welcome to the Empowering Choices podcast. Today we are talking about increasing your child's attention span. My attention span is so short, I can't even remember what we're talking about. We need to start
by increasing Josh's attention span, and then we can more fully.
Which that is a good point, because I feel like we're talking about increasing something that adults struggle with, I struggle with, we all struggle with, and then we take a child and now we're going to increase their attention span.
So Josh, what helps increase your attention span? You're real practical, just immediately.
I guess just like in the moment, or for like long-term improvement in the moment, or both.
Correct.
I really don't know. I feel like it depends on the situation. Like if I needed to pay attention and you guys were talking to me, if I have a phone in front of me or whatever, but if I close my laptop, if I close my laptop, put the phone away and just sit here, then I will have a better attention span.
Yeah. That's genuinely like a practical application. How to increase your child's attention span. There's the arguments around, do they have something in their hand?
Right.
And sometimes that helps depending on your child. But again, it comes down to know your child. But yeah, if they have a phone in their hand, that's probably not going to help.
Right.
There's been a lot of legitimate research that's been done on this. Fidget toys were created to help people with ADHD be able to focus, at different times. I know that with a variety of the different learning styles, they have determined that doodling, while someone is listening to a lecture or in class, with autism, sometimes listening to music at the same time will help them focus on what the discussion is. I knew an adult who was a high-level manager, and she got called on the carpet from one of her bosses who said, I noticed that you sit there and you doodle, in the trainings. I want you to stop that. And she literally said, do you want me to remember and retain the information? And her boss said, yes, I do. That's what they're for. And she said, then you need to let me doodle. And he goes, no, don't do it. And she said, from that point on, she never remembered anything that happened in those trainings.
She knew herself well enough to know that was something that helped her focus.
Very much so. And he did not seem to care about what helped her focus. He wanted it to look a certain way, And so she had already learned what increases my attention span. And then the environment was not willing to allow her to have that.
And then contra-wise, if I doodle during a training, that decreases my ability to retain information. So as frequently we come about to, not every solution is going to work for every child. It's not hand every child a fidget toy. No, not by default.
Well, you said it in the opening, know your child.
Yep.
There's over 24 learning styles that they've been able to discover human beings have. So you have to get to know your child and then help your child get to know themselves, and then help them by, at first, usually advocating for them in certain situations, and then help them learn how to advocate for themselves.
Okay, I already have a question. So as a parent, I feel like part of what you're trying to do is you're trying to go, I want my child to be able to pay attention. I want them to focus. I want them to do stuff. So my initial strategy on that is okay, I don't want to overexpose them to stuff, because I don't want them to get I always have to have all these things and listen to music while I'm doing this and blah, blah, blah. On the flip side, one of the things that's popular now is we can't even watch videos on YouTube where someone's talking without having in the background a game being played or something. So, and I actually saw a thing yesterday that was someone posted a video. They were older. They said that my mind is blown learning how my younger sibling is preparing for a test. And it was where there was some program where you could dump in essentially the flashcards, but then it did that while playing music, while showing you a video game. And you're doing all that while watching the stuff.
Multitasking.
Yeah. So I guess my question would be, on one hand, yes, as an adult, I could go, okay, I know that playing music while watching a video game somehow helps me retain this information. But with my child, do I start there, or do I start with a couple years of, no, we're not going to do that, you're going to sit here and watch it? Like, how do you figure that out, and how
Jump
quickly?
To a couple of years.
Okay.
Why would it take a couple of years to figure that out? Because I think we start with a couple of years, at least I've heard parents do this, as a way of, let me just get them into the habit of doing what I think works best, and then they'll just, eventually that'll just work best for them.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with parents of teenage kids who the parent, and a lot of times the dad is saying, you have got to tell them to do their homework, turn off the music, turn off the video game, turn off the movie that they're watching, and just do their homework. And I will turn to the kid and go, what are your grades? A's and above. I'm like, you have above A's? That's interesting.
You have above
Yeah.
That's amazing. They're like, yeah, I do all the extra credit. So you have
Right.
Dad,
They're actually not kidding.
Do they have above A's? And dads are usually like, yeah, I didn't know there was an above, but they do a lot of, they have A's.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So what's the problem? What exactly is the problem? Well, that's not how you do homework. Apparently, it really could be for your child. Now, usually these are kids who have Asperger's or high functioning autism.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. You mentioned that way that those videos are coming out. It's coming out in the way that someone with autism or Asperger's might really take in that information. Now it's being given to all the world as if everybody does that.
Right.
The child will then say, if I turn things off, I won't learn or be able to complete anything. You have to get to the place where you understand and they understand what it is. So you have to get through your presets first.
Right.
What do you think this is supposed to look like? You're going to go back to, how was it for me? That's going to be your preset, but you made someone who might have a different slice.
Right.
And so you have to be open to some of those things. I look at the grades and go, and I looked at her and I said, listen, if your grades drop, your parents have a legitimate platform to stand on. And she was like, oh, they won't drop. I'm like, okay. And you're retaining. She goes, oh, I'm retaining very much. And she was. I mean, she was a genius. But at the same time, because like I've seen some of those videos, online, and I'm like, you're trying to show me something on this side and something's happening on this side, and I want to just focus on one or the other, and I don't understand why you're mixing the two. So for me, that's a bad way of collecting that in. And I have multiple things that happen when I do work.
Yeah.
And so why don't you just begin to pay attention as your children are doing homework and see what helps them to be able to focus on the homework they're doing.
Right.
4th grade is a huge bump in our society to where homework doubles in intensity. It doesn't necessarily double in volume, but it's this big step up, and I've heard a lot of parents and a lot of kids talk about 4th grade was like this really hard year for me. And as long as they kept going, then, they were able to kind of, get a handle on that again. But starting with helping them see where they're at and how those things are going. So if they're beginning to struggle with doing their homework, add in some music.
Right.
Add in something and see how that goes.
And this is probably a whole different podcast, but some of this I assume would be age dependent, because you probably shouldn't look at your 2-year-old and go, wow, they have trouble paying attention, so I'm going to let them have an iPad and play music and do whatever. So where, at what age, because I feel like, or at least for me, I'm going, hey, in order to help him develop attention, I'm not exposing him to all this stimulus. But then at what place is it when they start having homework? Is it in first grade?
Here's one of the great things is that we've done so much research on the human being that at the various ages, we have an approximation of where their attention span should be. And so if you do some work as a parent and go, hey, okay, my 2-year-old, what kind of attention span should they have? Right. Oh, that seems about right. Or my 5-year-old, what sort of attention span should they have? Yeah. Okay, that seems about right. When my son came to us, and we got him when he was 4, he was my wife's second cousin, and it wasn't going to work for his biological mom. he was like the Tasmanian devil, and he would just move around the living room.
Yeah.
And things were just completely upset and upended like the Tasmanian devil. And, toys were just all over. He didn't play, he just destroyed.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. And so I'm like, okay, we got to work on your attention span. So one of the things I did is I would set him up with me on the couch, and I put on cartoons that I liked.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't even know what those are yet. And so I needed something that kept my attention span in this whole process. And I'd be like, all right, let's watch Popeye. And he would start to move, and I'd be like, all right, we're going to watch Popeye. And I would just kind of hold him there, and I would be talking to him about the cartoon. And he's like wiggling and squirming and trying to move. And so what I'm trying to do is go with, how old is he? He's 4.
Yeah.
So an appropriate attention span, about 3-4 minutes in there. And so I'm just keeping him here for 3-4 minutes and talking about the show and pointing up there and doing these different things. And then I would let him go. And then he would go and do his thing. Next day, we'd do the same thing. Next day, it would be a little bit longer. Next day, because I think I started under where his attention span was.
2 minutes.
Oh, yeah. And just began to build that up and build that up and build that up. And I did the same thing with toys. I would pick a toy a day, and we would sit down and play with it for 10 minutes, I think it was. Now, play included me holding him here and playing in front of him because he didn't know how to play. And so I'm introducing him into this. I am holding him there only for that time amount to be able to help him be able to see this engagement. Then I would let him go. Then the next day we would, do it again. It got to the place where, like with cars, he could sit down, and he has Asperger's. And so he would line up the cars, and then he would drive one out, drive it around, move it back, drive it to the end, park it in the end. And then he would do it again. I would take one out of the middle and try to drive it around. And he'd be like freaking out, put it back. It has to go in the row. And I'm like, okay, that's not something that I want to try and change because his attention is on it.
Right.
And he's having fun.
Yeah.
So I thought, what if I were to build things around him and see if I could challenge where his mind might be thinking of having fun? So I got the Lincoln Logs out, and I built all of these town structures around him. And he would just look at these things, and then he would drive his cars and park them and look at these things. And then I would have different cars, my cars, and then I would drive them to the different townhouses, and I would like park them and move them around and then, kind of go from there. And the first thing he did was my cars now had to be in his line. But when it came to my cars, he could then drive them out and put them in a house. And then he had to come back and be in the line. And so I'm slowly kind of challenging, because it takes patience to be able to do some different things like this. Now, with Asperger's and autism, going to be more patient. With kids who don't have that, you're not going to have as much of this kind of slow grinding piece that's going to happen. Pretty soon, he's like taking the cars out of the line, and he's going and playing around the houses and things. And then eventually he's the one getting the Lincoln Logs out and building the houses and then driving the cars around. They always had to start from the line.
Right.
But it was able to expand. Now, fast forward to today where he's 22, he is at home right now playing an online video game while watching a movie, while talking or taking in other videos all at the same time, and he's retaining the information and could tell me all about it. Even if the movie's one he's probably seen 14,000 times, but he is sitting through it.
Yeah. I'm such a technology nerd, but it kind of makes me think about like processors and how different processors can focus on different things, like either being singular in task, and maybe they can run a task very fast, but then others are multi-threaded. And so it's kind of like our brains, some people, because like for me, as all over the place as I feel like I am, if I'm watching a video and then I get an email or I get a whatever, I so don't even know what happened that I will rewind it like 10 times because then I'll get distracted again, look at something, then I'll be like, I don't know what happened. And I'm like not taking those things in at the same time.
Right.
But yeah, like my wife, when she did nursing school as an adult, I thought, oh, you're going to need like a desk and you're going to, we got to get all this stuff. Where do you want to set up? Well, she ended up doing nursing school while laying on a couch watching Netflix. And did great. As where I can't do both of those things. So yeah, so I guess you're saying you got to kind of figure out where the child is, what they are. But then I guess one of my questions would be, I think about me and my learning styles, which would hold my attention span or not. And then that was incompatible with a lot of my teachers. So do you just go automatically if a teacher says your kid doesn't have a good attention span, do you just go, well, something's wrong with the kid? Or could it be that something's wrong with the system that doesn't know how to accommodate that?
So there's
another coin toss right there.
Well, there's another series of podcasts right there that we should get to. I'll need a little more information and questions though.
Okay.
From your side.
We can do it.
And at the same time, to answer your question, what you need to do is, as a parent, you get in there and get to know the teacher. You need to build a bridge with the teacher, build a relationship with the teacher, and then you advocate for your child by saying, look, this is what we see at home. This is what we see that helps.
Got it.
Teachers are generally good people, caring people who want to help, who want to teach, who want to do a great job as their part in any society. They often find themselves feeling alone. And sometimes when they're saying, this is what's going on with the kid, then we as parents just look at our kid and go, how could you be such a bad kid? Verse, all right, let's talk about this. What do you mean? I mean, my parents did this very thing. They would go into the school. They would get to know the teachers. They would have these discussions. They knew they had hard kids. They wanted them to know that they were supported. But they also wanted the teachers to know and the schools to know that they first and foremost supported their kids in their best well-being. Right. And so that's what they were there for. If their kids, and they told us, if you do bad things, we will come down on you, and you stand by the teachers in the school, but building that bridge and helping the teachers to not feel like they are so on their own can help them begin to listen to what it is that you're seeing about your kid at home.
So I'll just share kind of, Eric, you were talking about things that help you focus and they help you. And Josh, you're like, that wouldn't work for me. Right. And then, so like when I need to focus on stuff, generally like the thing you were talking about, Josh, of the like away from people, quiet, like that's where I do my best work. And at best, that's not the right phrase, but like the only time I would usually listen to something was when I was trying to drown out the rest of the house. Right. And so like I explicitly for myself, if I was looking for something auditory to play, it wasn't to help me focus, it was to block something else out. And so I would look for like classical music that has like a good volume across like bass and treble so that it's like doing a good job blocking stuff. Right. And then never anything with lyrics, or that would never allow me to focus. And then I discovered online white noise generators that had settings that were called speech blockers. Nice. And then those had like variability, like it would kind of do like the ocean thing where it would go, but for me, it was audio so that I could create a quiet environment. And if the environment was quiet, silence was just fine. So, I mean, and that's proof of like 3 adults sitting at the table that like 3 different things are going to work for. So yeah, like we don't want to expose our kids intentionally to things that are like things that we know are attention span reducing. You know, there's like, I don't know, you get TikTok blamed for things, but it's a good example of the type, right? Shiny, flashy things that go by whip, 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 right, are bad for your attention span.
Yeah.
Right. Generally. So yeah, you wouldn't want to expose your 2-year-old to that stuff like a whole bunch on purpose.
Right.
So like, yeah, let's turn off all the screens. Let's play in the living room. Let's play with cars. And that's, that's like good for kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Electronics do pull down our attention spans. They noticed that with TVs. You know, that the TV was killing the attention span of the person. You know, I think in the 80s they were doing some of that, those studies on that. You know, so I heard about somebody the other day that when this person was a child, their parents highly encouraged them to sleep in the car while they were driving so that they didn't have to deal with them.
So they didn't have to deal with them. I'm like, wait, where's this going?
Yeah.
And this is coming from the adult now. And the adult now has said it is very hard for them to drive in the car without becoming tired.
Oh, no.
Wow.
They learned that lesson
That's
too well.
Well, and that's why I'm bringing that up. And attention span is a part of a muscle piece. The brain is muscle. It's tissue. It's not the same muscle as others.
Talk about it like a muscle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as you're working with the attention span, the more that your attention span is only needed to be short, then the more your brain is going to only give you short attention span pieces because your subconscious is thinking that's what it's supposed to be because that's the way it's been trained to be.
Yeah.
You know, and so you can pull things out and help the attention span to be longer and longer and longer and longer.
Yeah.
Video games are not going to be helpful in that.
They're frequently, instant reward.
Yeah.
They go, because that also includes going to the reward center of the brain. And I used to be a gamer. And I remember one time I'm like, you know what? I've been doing this, this certain thing for months and months and months. I want to do something else. I'm like, I want to read a book. I've got a book I want to read. And so I sat down and I was like, okay, I'm going to read a book. And I got through the first paragraph. And it's not that the first paragraph was painful. It's that reading after playing reward, achievement,
shiny,
gold,
noise,
weapons, things happening, all this stuff happening. I went, oh my gosh, this is torture. I can't read a book.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back and play a game, And so my attention span had been so used to getting rewarded with that part of my brain that I noticed I did a little kind of test on myself. It took a day and a half for that to wear off. And I could literally just sit and read something and
but you had to have
enjoy it.
turned off the video game.
I had to step away from
for
the
a
video
day and a half.
for a day and a half.
For your brain to kind of go,
Yep.
oh.
Yeah. And it would readjust.
So we've got a person watching this might hear conflicting things. You said, and I just wanted to bring it up. You said at the beginning there might be a child for whom listening to music and watching a video while doing homework might be good for them. And then we're also now saying video games might be bad for you because they might damage your attention span. Like, flesh that out for me. I know those aren't probably contradictions, but someone listening to it might hear that.
Here's what you have to do. Get to know your child, get to know yourself, and help your child get to know themselves.
Right.
Because there are kids who have, the autism, the Asperger's, and some who don't, that they could be playing or paying attention to a video game while doing their homework, while watching a movie. Yeah. And it works. Now, my example was all I was doing in some of my free time was playing a game like WoW. And then after a certain amount of time, I'm like, I need something else. But because there was no learning that I'm using that to help me focus on, I'm purely focused on it, and so that's one of those differences. Whereas if I was doing a video game and working on some kind of an assignment and watching, some kind of a movie at the same time, I wouldn't pick that one.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pick a WoW or an EverQuest or anything like that. Too much detail, too much things that I have to pay attention to. I might pick, and I don't actually add in the video games, when I'm trying to do things, but I always do have, some kind of a movie or some kind of a documentary or something, going on the TV that helps me to continue to be focused.
Would it be fair to say this was kind of something that what Josh was asking earlier, like, when do you attempt these things, right? Would it be fair to say you start with the let's just try to give you a quiet space to focus. Because if you don't know the answer,
Right.
I want to help my kid focus. Do we start with the quiet space and see if that works? And as opposed to starting with the let's play music and video all at the same time as a starting place.
Yeah. So here's where I'm going to say that you should start. You and your spouse or you and your partner should get together and talk and say, what helped you focus when you were a kid?
Even better.
What didn't help you focus? Because you've given 50% DNA from each of you. And so some of the slices of this are going to be more from one side than from the other as you have the beauty of the person that you're trying to discover. And so start with that knowledge and then begin to do it kind of like what you were suggesting. Maybe you just provide a quiet environment and see how that goes for the child. You know, maybe they are like, hey, I want to come to the kitchen table. You know, you guys are around. I can get my stuff done, you know, and then pay attention to how they're adding things in and how they're seeking things out. And when they get stuck, then you can come up with different ideas. Have you ever tried classical music? Have you ever tried your music, you know, that you enjoy, you know, and begin to see, you know, what happens. They're going to, in some ways, migrate possibly to places. Like I know one girl that I have, and she does her homework downstairs and watches TV as she does her homework, you know, and she migrated to that on her own and she gets it done.
Yeah. And it sounds like half know your child, but also half don't let your preconceived ideas of what it should be come to play. Like one of the things that I discovered as an adult when I was in college, I realized that I could study for an exam. This sounds crazy, but I had access to this big room that had all these whiteboards. There were like 13 whiteboards, and it was a big enough room you could ride a bicycle. I would write out stuff on each of these, and then I would ride my bicycle to each whiteboard, look at it, take something in, and I would do that for, move your computer, Lucas, I just watered you. I would do that just maybe take it that way. Backward. Yeah. I would, I don't know if this says anything about my attention span there that I just watered Lucas's computer, but I would ride my bicycle and I would use that to learn. And then, I now as an adult, I realize if I listen to an audiobook, when I think about concepts from it, I can visually see where I was at on the road. But when I was a kid, when people would be studying me for a test, I'd be wanting to roll on the floor, move around, do stuff. And they would say, no, sit down, be quiet, stay in this one spot. And so that was like preconceived ideas about what it was versus if I had been moving around, I probably could have retained and learned that information better.
That, when you're moving around, it's doing some bilateral processing in your brain that isn't going to happen if you're not moving around.
Yeah.
I remember watching the Stargate series, and when it came to Stargate Atlantis, they had a scientist in there named Rodney, and when Rodney needed to focus on a problem, your example of the whiteboards without a bicycle, that's brilliant. I love that. Because you're getting so many different things all at the same time. He would have rooms of whiteboards, and that was a part of the film, or the show, is that you just showed him going to the different whiteboards, doing the different things on the different whiteboards, and then moving from whiteboard to whiteboard to whiteboard to whiteboard. So he's moving, thinking, processing all at the same time. And it's, activating different areas of his brain while doing that. That's an effective way of learning. I like things big, and it's just a part of the design of me. So my dream house is going to be, like a very big house, 5,500 square feet or bigger. My wife is like, why do you think you need that? I'm like, for one, it has to have an English style library with a 25-foot table. She's like, why would you need that? I'm like, it's simple. You get all the things, and I'm like, you see me now. When I'm doing something, I get all the things out on the floor and on the table, right? She's like, well, yeah. So on a 25-foot table, you can put it all on the table, and you can organize it, and you can move around the table as you are working on whatever it is that you are working on. kind of like riding a bike
Yep.
around the
Yep.
things. I think I produce better with that movement.
Yeah.
Whereas she just needs a small enough space to put what she's doing, and she can do the exact same thing on that small enough space.
Yeah.
She just doesn't understand why it's different. Why can't, and that's the thing, is her preconceived notion is everybody should be able to do that. And my preconceived notion is that would kill me. I can't do that because we are different by design.
Yeah. Well, that's
Well, I think we
interesting.
might have to wrap up and get a mop.
Yes, we might need to get a mop, and we did come up with several other topics for podcasts, and one of them could also be why am I so inattentive that I
No, it's not that. You talk with your hands, and
so I
yes.
should not have an open water bottle
Correct.
next to me.
Yeah, you just need a sippy cup.
Yeah, a sippy cup. I
Yeah.
can do that. I've got some of those.
Empowering Choices branded sippy cups.
There you go. Exactly. So yeah, so let us definitely know in the comments, what you think about some of these methods, some of these techniques, if you've tried them, what works for you and what's working for your kids. And we'll go get something to clean this water up, and we'll see you on the next episode.
It'll be Josh's sweatshirt. We'll clean it up real good, don't you?
Yeah.